"Linda, my dear, could you get me a glass of water?" asked my grandmother, struggling to sit up in bed. "Of course, Grandma." I ran over to her. "Are you feeling ill again?" "Yes, dear. I always feel sick now that I'm old." "No, Grandma, we're going to cure you. We're going to beat your anemia." "How can we beat it, Linda? You've heard how much the treatment costs." "Don't worry, Grandma. I'll find the money. I'll find a way. You'll be the healthiest with me." My wonderful granddaughter, may the Lord bless you. I was already 18, had finished school, and was working as a barista in a local cafe. I hadn't thought about continuing my studies yet. There was no time for that. I never knew my parents. My mother died in childbirth, and my grandmother didn't even know about my father. She just said that he messed with her head and disappeared. Apart from my grandmother, I had no one close or dear to me. We always lived together in a small apartment in a port city. My grandmother always tried to give me the best. She worked as a seamstress in a small atelier and took orders from home to provide everything I needed, so that I didn't feel deprived of anything. I grew up a smart girl, always able to stand up for myself. I loved my grandmother more than anything, and I was always very afraid that something might happen to her, that I might lose her. And now this anemia. I had no idea where to get money for treatment, and fast. But I believed that everything would work out, that I would be able to cure my grandmother of this terrible disease. I was on my way home from work. It was around 9 in the evening and starting to get dark. I still had to go to the store and buy something for dinner. I passed an open cafe where a group of young people were having fun. "Hey, beautiful, come and join us," one of them shouted. "Maybe when I get a Rolls Royce, I'll consider it." "For now, there's no need to shout and bother passers-by," I muttered, without slowing down. "You're brave," said the same young man with a bright smile. There was something forbiddingly attractive about him. I tried not to think about it. Nonsense. I needed to think about my grandmother and work, not some spoiled boy who only knew how to sit in a cafe and have fun with his friends. I went into the nearest store, quickly grabbed everything I needed, and came out with a paper bag. Looking down to avoid tripping on the old rusty steps, I didn't notice the same smiling boy who was in the cafe. "Heavy bag, dear?" he asked, smiling. "Just a normal bag," I replied. "Shouldn't it be in the cafe? Have your friends left? Can't I help a girl who stole my heart?" "Let's skip that part. I already read that in cheap books when I was 14. Go have fun." I walked quickly away from that flirt who apparently had no problems in life. He probably had a rich father or mother who solved all his life's difficulties, leaving him only to wander around the city at night and go out with his friends or maybe with girls. It irritated me that I was thinking about him. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I simply lacked the joys of being a girl. After all, I couldn't afford to go out with my friends. They were all dating someone, enjoying their youth, while I had to think about how to survive, how to find money for my grandmother's treatment. The doctor said it was best to start treatment soon, so there was a chance that everything would be fine and Donna Laura would recover quickly and live many happy years ahead. I would do anything to find the money to pay for this treatment. I had no other choice. "Hello, Grandma?" I called from the door. "Hello, my dear," she replied in a more cheerful voice than usual. "How are you today?" "A bit better. I'm not lying like a log all the time. I've watered the flowers." "You're so clever. How happy I am. I'll soon cure you. We'll go cycling together." "Oh, granddaughter, what kind of cyclist am I?" "A wonderful cyclist." I kissed Grandma on the cheek and started unpacking the shopping. The next day, I was in my usual place in the cafe, behind the counter. There were few customers in the morning, probably because it was a day off and people had decided to rest after a week's work. Suddenly, he walked in, that boy who had been waiting for me near the store with the sloping balcony. "It's fate," he exclaimed, approaching the counter and looking into my eyes. "It's just a small town," I replied calmly. "You'll probably meet a familiar face somewhere." "No, it's something else." "Until what time are you here today?" "I want to treat you to the best ice cream in town. I know this city inside out. There's no ice cream here worth admiring." "Are you placing an order?" I tidied my hair. Yes, I'd like a coffee with Baileys. Can you do that?" A girly drink, don't you think?" "Maybe, but today I really wanted it." He looked at the badge on my uniform. "I'm Georgie. In a few minutes your coffee will be ready, Georgie." "Thank you, dear." He sat down at the nearest table and stared out of the window. Georgie finished her coffee and left quickly, leaving a generous tip and a small note. It seemed so unusual to see such a note in the 21st century, in the age of high technology, when everyone communicates exclusively by text and phone. It reminded me of something childish, charming. Beautiful thief of my heart, I beg you not to refuse me. I'll come back at closing time and we'll go for a walk. I'll only treat you to ice cream. I think about you all the time. Georgie. I read the paper and put it in my pocket. We walked down a small alley and ate strawberry ice cream. It was so easy to be with him. Now he didn't seem like the annoying show-off who threw around cute phrases just for fun or to show off in front of his friends. We talked about everything and enjoyed the coolness of the evening. "Where do you study?" Georgie asked. "Not anymore. School is behind us. What's next? You're not planning to sign up for anything?" "Not at the moment. I have a sick grandmother. I need to work now. I'm saving up for her treatment. She's all I have in the world." "I understand." Georgie suddenly stopped, pulled me to him, and kissed me. I started to push him away, but the kiss was so tender, so pure that I simply couldn't resist. I'd been dating Georgie for about a month. I felt like I wanted to spend my whole life with him. I fell madly in love with that smiling boy, looking forward to every new encounter. I couldn't concentrate at work, I slept badly, and I was completely at peace. "Linda, what's going on, my dear?" My grandmother asked me one night when I brought her a glass of warm milk with honey before bed. "Nothing's happened," I replied, averting my gaze. "Are you in love?" my grandmother asked directly. "Grandma, what are you saying? I just started dating a nice guy, that's all." "With a nice guy," my grandmother sighed. "Your mother once met a nice guy too, but he disappeared very quickly as soon as she found out she was expecting a baby. He disappeared very quickly. Oh, don't start now, or you'll start crying again. But at least you have me. Yes, I thank heaven for that every day. Every single day. But still, my dear, be careful that this nice boy of yours doesn't hurt you. You know, it's very easy to fool an 18-year-old girl, believe me." "Grandma, you're not old at all." "I'll be careful, I promise." I kissed my grandmother on the forehead and turned off the light. "Why does the coffee smell so bad?" I asked the cafe owner one morning. "Does it usually smell like this?" he replied, unpacking a box. "I'm telling you, it smells like sour milk or something. Have you changed suppliers?" "No, I haven't. Are your hormones working?" "My hormones are fine." I pouted and started cleaning the cups. All day I felt strange. Either I'd eaten something wrong or I'd caught a virus. My head was throbbing and my stomach upset, a terrible condition. At night, I couldn't sleep. I pushed the bad thoughts away. No, that couldn't be true. But the delay spoke more eloquently than any words. I decided to put an end to these doubts. I barely waited for dawn and ran to the pharmacy. Fortunately, I had the day off. I always tried to pick up more shifts, so weekends were a real luxury. Yes, I saw the little red cross that instantly appeared on the test display. "Holy Virgin Mary, no, not now," I mumbled, sitting on the edge of the bathtub. I hoped that everything in my life would work out. Georgie came from a good family, he had money, he could help with Grandma's treatment. A child wasn't in my plans, I hadn't achieved anything in life yet. But the Lord sent me this baby for a reason, so it was destined to come into the world. I closed my eyes, remembering Georgie's words. "You know, I want us to have 3 children," he said, as he walked me home. "Why 3? I asked in surprise. "1 for you, 1 for me, and the 3rd for these 2 older ones." "Well, you made that up. What children? We don't have time for children now. We need to work and achieve something in this life." "One thing doesn't stop the other," he smiled and took my hand. "One thing doesn't stop the other," I mumbled. I decided to inform Georgie about my condition as soon as possible. He would certainly support me and find out how we could live. I quickly wrote a message to my beloved. We agreed to meet at the fountain at 6 in the evening. I was very nervous. I was sure Georgie would take the news well, but I still felt a little anxious. "What did you mean, darling?" Georgie asked. "I don't have much time. My father asked me to go with him on a business trip." "Georgie, I'm pregnant," I said abruptly. "What? What did you say? What did you say? What you heard? I'm pregnant? We're going to have a baby? Are you happy? Are you crazy? What kind of baby could there be? I'm not ready to change diapers and lose sleep at night. I have lots of plans for the next 10 years, but there's no room for crying babies. But you talked about children, I said, struggling to breathe. You said you wanted 3 children. Yes, maybe, but not now. I still need to finish university, and besides, my dad has promised to get me a job at his friend's company. But this baby is already in my belly. It can't disappear. Maybe I can help you. I'll find a doctor. You're suggesting I have an abortion, aren't you? I sat on the edge of the fountain. Drops of water refreshed my heated back. Well, yes. There's no other way. Actually, there is. Giving birth. But that's not the solution for us. Just then, Georgie's friends approached. Hi, they greeted cheerfully. Are we interrupting? No, not at all. It's just that Linda got a bit carried away playing mommy-to-be, didn't she, dear? He turned to me. I was silent, trying not to cry right there. You know, darling, you're really beautiful and you're amazing in bed, but I'm not ready for all these things like marriage and having a child. So let's part amicably without unnecessary drama. If you need help with the doctor, you know where to find me. Then Georgie just turned and walked away with his friends. I sat there with tears streaming down my cheeks. At first, I tried to fight them, wiping them away with the back of my hand, but then I stopped, letting them flow freely. I sat there for half an hour before finally getting up and going home. I didn't want to go home. My grandmother would surely notice that I was crying, and hiding the truth from her would be impossible. So I turned into my favorite alley, which was wild and abandoned. There were few people there, and I could enjoy the silence. What the hell? A voice came from right next to me. That damn squirrel's escaped again, damn it. A guy in frayed jeans and worn-out sneakers appeared on the path from behind the trees. Wow, that's a stroke of luck. He stared at me and started clicking his camera nonstop. What are you doing? I muttered angrily, covering my face with my hand. Just pass, you incomplete photographer. You'd be better off buying new sneakers instead of these shabby ones. Or did you spend all your money on that fancy gadget? You're a bad girl and you look so sweet and delicate. He smiled, lowering the camera. If you're going to be mean here, has anyone hurt you? Life has hurt me, photographer. And I really am an incomplete photographer. I need to present my final project called 3 Images, but I can't find a model. And now I seem to have found one. Would you agree to be my model for a week? I'll pay you. I can even pay you in advance. Oh, you will? You can't afford new sneakers, but you'll pay for it? I replied skeptically. I can pay for a coffee and an ice cream sometimes, so go look for squirrels. They'll pose for you for free. Listen, I'm serious. I have real money. And sneakers? I just don't care what I wear, as long as they're comfortable. What do I need to do? I softened a little. First, tell me your name. I'm Santiago. I'm Linda. I held out my hand. Nice to meet you. So, you're in? I really need the money, not for anything silly, but for my grandmother's treatment, and the treatment costs a fortune. I could pay in installments, but I haven't come up with anything yet. Listen, I'm going to pay for your grandmother's treatment. I'll borrow from my uncle if my savings aren't enough. Do you agree? I nodded. An offer like that was too tempting. My grandmother would live a full life, and I wouldn't have to jump out of bed at night to see if she was breathing. But the money up front, I said quickly. It's a deal. Give me your number. Santiago took his cell phone out of his pocket. I gave him the number and looked at him. He had unusual eyes, deep, but at the same time naive and almost childlike, shining as if fireflies were living in them, about to leap out. Some good news today, I thought as I drove home. I firmly decided not to tell my grandmother anything about the baby or that strange photographer. My phone rang. It was Santiago. Who else? He sent me a flower emoji to save his number. Grandma, I have wonderful news for you, I shouted as I entered the cramped corridor. Grandma didn't answer. She must have fallen asleep, I thought, and went to her room. When I entered, I almost fainted. Laura was lying on the floor, her head thrown back. Santa Maria, no, not now. I started frantically dialing Santiago's number. Yes, Linda. By the grace of God, he replied, joking. Santiago, this is no time for jokes. Please help my grandmother. She's unconscious. We need to get her to hospital urgently. Give me the address. I'll be there in a minute. We sat in the dimly lit corridor of the local clinic. I was crying, and Santiago was trying to calm me down. It was so strange. We'd known each other for about an hour and a half, and we were already sitting together, waiting to hear what the doctor would say. It felt like this guy with the beat-up sneakers was an old friend or even a brother. I've never had a brother, a sister, or even a close friend, and now it seemed like I did. Dona Laura is out of danger, said the elderly doctor, suddenly appearing in the corridor. They'll release her home. I jumped. No, we're going to observe her for a few days. Haven't they told you about the treatment plan? Yes, when can we start? I'm ready to pay. I looked at Santiago. He nodded and started negotiating with the doctor, writing something down in a notebook with a thick pencil. Truly eccentric, this photographer, writing in a notebook in the age of gadgets. I was nervous, feeling nauseous. Suddenly, I remembered that I was expecting a baby. So many events that day, my head was spinning. Yes, I was pregnant. I hadn't had time to think about it properly yet. First Georgie with his teasing, then this photographer jumping out of the bushes, and now my grandmother, who decided to scare me into fainting in her bedroom. Come on, I'll take you home, said Santiago, holding my hand. Is everything all right? Is Grandma going to start treatment? Yes, from tomorrow. I've sorted everything out. The payment can be made into the clinic's account, no problem. Thank you. I squeezed his hand. I'd never been so grateful to anyone in my life, except my grandmother. Shall we start tomorrow? Santiago asked suddenly, opening the car door. What? I was surprised. Our project called 3 Faces. He smiled. Oh yes, whatever you want, as long as Grandma... She'll be fine, don't worry. We drove through our city, which had already plunged into darkness. It was eerily quiet and peaceful. We rarely met any passers-by. Everyone had retreated into their homes. It was great when someone could support you, especially when it was so necessary. I couldn't sleep, so much had happened. Thoughts raced through my mind, and there was that unpleasant feeling of nausea. I sat at the small kitchen table, drinking green tea with lemon, which helped a little to combat the nausea and had a slightly calming effect. What do I do now? I thought. How do I deal with Grandma and now a baby too? I really don't have anyone else to rely on. My thoughts slowly changed direction. Santiago, the photographer, was so peculiar, calling me a gift from heaven for some reason. He was different from the boys I'd met in the city since childhood. There seemed to be a whole world in his eyes, a magical, wild world, and his passion for photography simply amazed me. He was willing to pay for my grandmother's treatment just to look at me through his lens and take pictures. Funny. We met at 6 in the same place, in the old alley. It was the time I finished my shift that day. Today's topic will be modesty, said Santiago, placing a package on the bench. What's this? I pointed to the packet. This is what will help you incorporate the theme. Scarves, blankets, everything you need. I've prepared well. We're going to make this project happen. The best agencies are going to collaborate with me. Santiago looked dreamily at the sky. You dream big, don't you? I laughed. Instead of just working, here you are with your camera, chasing girls and carrying a bag of mysterious things. Because I want this to be my job. My uncle pushed me into law school, but I didn't last 2 years. I left. It's not for me. All those laws, articles. My world is the cloud-covered sky, the setting sun shining like a spark in the dark blue sky, and a girl with eyes the color of moss on the bark of a tree. My eyes are ordinary. Some moss invented them. Right. Tell me what I need to do. I threw my bag on the bench. Here, take this scarf and put it on your head. He handed me a white silk scarf. You want to turn me into a nun? I mocked. No, just a very modest girl. It's just an image. I'm not asking you to become one, although that's impossible. I put the scarf over my dark hair and looked at him. Yes, that's it. Look at that tree. Not at the lens, at the tree. Yes, genius, Holy Mary, what eyes. I could look at them forever. Lower your left hand a little. Left, like this. Perfect. And so it went for about 2 hours, until it was completely dark. Santiago, from a normal guy in shabby jeans and worn-out sneakers, turned into an incomprehensible creature. He crouched down, jumped on the bench, and clicked away with his big camera. At first, I thought it was silly, but then I got involved in that world, infected by the photographer's madness. Now I wanted to pose, as I saw fit. "You're a fantastic model," complimented Santiago. "You just seem to know what to do," he said, putting the camera down and looking at me. "You know, I need some shots at dawn. Can we arrange that?" "Sure." I shrugged and sat down tiredly on the bench. "How's your grandmother?" he asked, sitting down next to me. "She's still weak, but the treatment has started." "I'm so happy, thank you. You crazy photographer. Let's get something to eat. I've probably starved you. I know a cafe where they serve delicious grilled meat. You'll love it." I don't feel like going out. "Would you like to have dinner at my place?" I said. "That's perfect. Let's order in. I'm not a big fan of crowded places." We sat in the kitchen enjoying the delicacies Santiago had ordered from the same cafe he'd originally wanted to take me to. "Why are you looking at me so strangely?" I asked, biting into a thin loaf of bread. "Do I have ketchup on me?" "No, I'm sorry. It's just that your soul... incredible. You look like you were born to be a model. You could make millions from your photos." "Oh, right. How can anyone make money from that?" "Very easily. You're out of touch with beauty." "Yes, of course, that's not for me. I'm just a barista." "Sorry, I didn't mean to offend. Do you only work? Don't you study anywhere?" "Nowhere." I shook my head. "I don't have time to study. I have to earn a living, and my grandmother decided to get sick, and besides, we're going to beat this anemia, aren't we?" "Of course we will. There's no other option." He looked at me with such tenderness and unwavering confidence that my heart warmed. "You're a good boy, Santiago. I've never met anyone like you before." "Have you?" "Oh, come on, I'm just an ordinary guy, brought up by my aunt and uncle." "What about your parents?" "Sorry to ask." "No, it's fine. They died when I was 9 in a car accident." "I'm sorry," I said sadly. "My mother died soon after I was born, and I've never seen my father. Even my grandmother doesn't know who he is or where he lives." "Yes, life is hard," said Santiago softly. "But there's nothing we can do about it. Let's drink to the people who meet, the ones who really belong together." He filled the glasses with orange juice. "Well said. Finding the right person in this life can be difficult. You think you found someone you've dreamed of, but you end up being an idiot. Yes, Linda, someone really hurt you. I loved him like a fool. I thought I'd found a decent guy with whom I'd have a good family. He promised we'd have children and a house with a pool. But in reality..." "And in reality?" Santiago looked at me intently. "In reality, he offered money for an abortion and then dumped me to drink with his friends. I was just a diversion for him, a girl to have fun with, that's all." I lowered my gaze, my thick eyelashes fluttering slightly. "And you accepted?" Santiago asked softly. "Sorry for butting in." "What?" I snapped out of my thoughts. "No, I didn't accept. I can't offer that child anything, but I can't kill it. Of course, I haven't told Grandma anything, but I'll have to. And then there's work." "You're doing the right thing, Linda. If the Lord gives you a child, he knows what he's doing." He smiled and took my hand. "Thank you, Santiago. You're very kind. Too bad your parents didn't live to see that day. They would have been happy to have such a wonderful son." Santiago squeezed my hand tighter. I felt goosebumps all over my body. There was something about him, a mixture of tenderness and strength, reliability and romanticism. "So, tomorrow at dawn?" Santiago asked, and unexpectedly kissed my hand. "Wake me up, okay? I'm terrible at waking up early. I usually wake up on my way to work." "Okay, I'll pick you up and we'll have breakfast together before the photo shoot." Tomorrow's theme is rocker, although we haven't photographed modest yet. Santiago winked at me mischievously. "I never get bored with you." I leaned back in my chair. Day after day, we captured all 3 looks, and Santiago defended his graduation project. He was invited to collaborate with a large advertising agency. With my consent, he put my most glamorous photos on stock sites. "We're going to make good money, you and I," Santiago commented cheerfully one day as he walked me home after a short stroll. "Do you think anyone will buy my photos?" I asked incredulously. Of course, they'll line up to buy them. How is Mrs. Laura? They're releasing her tomorrow. Will you help me pick her up? Sure, let me know when and I'll be there. What a knight in white armor you are, I joked. What a splendid boy, this Santiago of yours, said Grandma while we were alone in her room. Santiago helped her into the chair and went off to sort some things out. Yes, Santiago is very kind, almost as if he were from another era, when noble knights were not uncommon. I avoided mentioning Georgie and her betrayal. I didn't talk about my pregnancy either. The most important thing was for Grandma to recover completely and regain her strength. We would make it, for sure. Now I found myself thinking about my crazy photographer almost all the time. My body shivered pleasantly when I remembered his eyes and how he casually kissed my hand while we talked over dinner in the apartment's small kitchen. The cafe had already closed, but we were still at the table, not wanting to leave. "Don't stay too long," shouted the owner from somewhere in the background. "Make sure you lock the door properly, Linda." "Okay, Ramon. Just another half hour and we'll leave." "I'll lock up properly." "I'm leaving," Ramon's voice came from the back exit. "Linda, come out with me," said Santiago suddenly. "What?" I almost choked. "I want you to be my wife." "Are you crazy? You know that I know. I think I can raise this child to be a decent person, unlike his biological father." I remained silent, a lump rising in my throat. "And you're not afraid I'll say yes?" I tried to disguise it. "I hope you do." Santiago smiled. He leaned towards me and we engaged in a long kiss. I was ready to spend my whole life like this. It was a different kiss, not the sharp, demanding kiss that Georgie gave me, but a tender kiss full of love. "Come on, I'll introduce you to Uncle and Auntie," said Santiago, getting up from his chair. A week later, we celebrated our engagement, and 2 months later, we got married. Although we didn't have a formal wedding, Grandma and Aunt Leia prepared a big feast. The table was laden with delicacies. "Darling, you need to leave work," said Aunt Leia as we cleaned up after the party. "Think of the baby." "Thanks, Auntie, but I can't. We need the money. Can't we sort it out?" She smiled, drying her hands with a towel. "You have us, me, and Uncle Theo, and Santiago is doing so well with his photos." Although his uncle used to scold him for dropping out of university, I always knew that my nephew would succeed. If you only knew my late sister Monica. Life was hard on her, if it hadn't been for that terrible accident. Tears welled up in Aunt Leah's eyes. "You know you look like her. Maybe Santiago fell madly in love with you." "You'd say that too, madly." I smiled. "Of course, madly. The boy has completely lost his mind. Have you seen the way he looks at you?" "How?" I was surprised. Like a loving father looks at his precious son. "He really loves you, darling." "I love Santiago too," I replied softly. "May God bless you with happiness for many, many years to come." Aunt Leia hugged me and patted me on the back. Maria Elena was born at the end of April. Both mother and baby were quickly released home, feeling great. Laura and Aunt Leia organized a real celebration for the girls' return. The lawn in front of the house was decorated with balloons and flags. Ribbons and bright flowers adorned a small gazebo. I was speechless with awe. I just looked at that magic and silently hugged Uncle Theo, Aunt Leia, and Grandma one by one. "Welcome home, darling," whispered Mrs. Laura. "Thank you, Grandma. How are you without me?" "Fine, just fine. Leah treats me like her own mother, and so does Theo. We're a real close-knit family." "Yes, we are." "Just don't make me cry or I'll start crying too." I stroked my grandmother's cheek. "No, my dear, no. Let me meet my granddaughter," Uncle Theo exclaimed. "Where is this beauty? She looks like her mother." "Don't shout, Theo," Leah scolded him. "You'll wake Maria Elena. Linda and I had better go to the nursery and put the baby in the wonderful cradle." She looked at me and smiled. "Finally, I'm home," I thought as the plane landed at the airport in my hometown. I was flying from the capital, where my husband had business. Santiago was a little late, so I was returning alone. We didn't want to move from our hometown, so we often had to fly to the capital and back. We joked about it, calling ourselves migratory birds. Although it was comfortable to fly business class, we still wanted to get in the air as quickly as possible and see our relatives. It was time to leave the cabin, and suddenly I saw him. Yes, it was Georgie, only he was in a wheelchair, being pushed by an elderly man. He had changed a lot. He was thinner and his face looked haggard. Our eyes met, and in the gaze of my daughter's biological father, I read longing and pain. "Hello," he said softly. "Hello, beautiful," replied Georgie, trying to smile, but without much success. I waited for Uncle Theo to pick me up. "Wait a minute," Georgie said to her escort. "I'm going to have a few words with this girl." "All right," replied the man, walking away. "You've become completely different," Georgie began. "So elegant, and you seem to radiate success. I've simply met a wonderful person. If it hadn't been for you, I might never have met Santiago." "Who is Santiago?" "A photographer, a very good photographer," I replied simply. "And the child? Did you solve that problem without me?" "Don't you understand yet, Georgie? A child is not a problem, but a divine gift. Maria Elena is already 5 years old, intelligent, and beautiful. She dances and sings very well. What do you do?" "I recently became a child psychologist. I was invited to a child development center in our town." "Yes, great. As you can see, I have nothing to be proud of. I had an accident the same day I left you at the fountain. I had a nice evening with my friends, and then, like an idiot, I got on my motorcycle and crashed into a truck. The doctor said I was born again. Usually in a collision like that, people die instantly." "Don't talk like that. You shouldn't call it death," I replied sympathetically. "I'm sorry this happened to you. Is there really nothing that can be done?" "No, nothing. I'll be stuck in this damn wheelchair for the rest of my days," he replied bitterly. "I'm sorry. Are your friends still in touch?" "What friends? Who needs a disabled person? They have their own lives. They came to visit me a few times when I was released from hospital, and that was it." "Yes, you really did have great friends, Georgie. It's my own fault. You have the friends you deserve. Don't despair. Life goes on. You have to live, if not for yourself, at least for your parents. Maybe you're right, darling." He smiled, "But it's difficult. Very difficult to accept." "I understand, but you have to try. Sorry, I have to go. They're waiting for me." A little girl in a red dress jumped out of the car. "Mom, I've missed you so much. Is Daddy coming tomorrow?" "Yes, darling, tomorrow or the day after. I missed you too." "I've learned a new dance." Maria Elena hugged me. "You're very clever. I picked her up." "She looks just like you," Georgie said. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me." I told him and went to the car. Rick came and pushed Georgie into the car that was waiting for them. That night, Georgie sat in the garden, looking at the stars and thinking. She thought about her life, abruptly interrupted. So many plans, working in a prestigious company, traveling the world. Now he could barely do anything on his own, and his trips were visits to the clinic in the capital for treatment. There was no result. He couldn't feel his legs or move a finger. Georgie often remembered me, the brave girl with mischievous eyes and 2 braids that made her look like a schoolgirl. He remembered the coffee with Baileys that I used to make especially for him, joking that it was a girl's drink, and the kisses. He had never experienced kisses like mine. He, the fool, didn't appreciate it. He saw me as something ordinary, just another girl to have fun with. What if he hadn't left me at the fountain? What if we'd gotten married and had a child? Maybe he hadn't had the accident and now he'd be happy, raising his daughter. Georgie didn't know the answer. Nobody did. Things like that were only known to the universe. "It's been a long time since I photographed my wonderful model," said Santiago before going to sleep. "But am I still a model? That was 5 years ago, when I was just a girl. Now you're even more beautiful, my green-eyed witch," my husband said, kissing me on the shoulder. "You're still a crazy photographer? I think you love your cameras more." "No, my dear. I love you and Maria Elena much more." "I can't believe it," I joked, poking his chest with my finger. "I'm going to prove it right now." Santiago began to shower my neck with soft kisses. "I saw Georgie recently," I said, cuddling up to him and resting my head on his shoulder. "Who?" He didn't understand. "He's Maria Elena's biological father." "I hope you're not falling in love again." "Of course not, silly. I love you, my photographer with your shabby jeans and sneakers that are begging to be thrown away. Remember the day we met in that abandoned alley? How could I forget? That's when I met the best girl in the world. He kissed me on the forehead. Then he got drunk with his friends, got on his motorcycle, and crashed into a truck. Horrible, he was quickly punished by heaven. God loves you very much, my green-eyed fairy. You know, I feel sorry for him. He's so helpless in that wheelchair. He brought it on himself. Stop feeling sorry for that bastard who only took advantage of your naivety and then discarded you like an unwanted object. Thank you, darling, I said with emotion, hugging him even tighter. For what? For being you. For coming out of the bushes with your camera and saving my grandmother and me from that hell. Linda, my girl, what are you saying? I thank fate every day for knowing you. But there's still a debt outstanding. What debt? I sat down and looked him in the eye. I want a son. I already have a daughter. Now I want a son. Oh no, I've just started working as a psychologist. You'll have to wait for your son. I laughed. I've waited long enough. I'm not waiting any longer. I think now is the perfect time. He started tickling me. 9 months later, Santiago Alonso proudly called himself the father of daughter Maria Elena and son Marcus.